vote to approve the agenda or the minutes until we have quorum. But if there are any questions or comments related to the minutes, we could take those right now. None. Okay, and also want to provide a warm welcome to our newest school board members who are joining us for our first joint city-county DPS board meeting. So welcome, all four of you, one returning member. Okay. I'll just move us along into our first discussion item while we wait for other folks to join for our DPS transportation presentation. And we have Chief of Operations Officer Kenneth Barnes and Senior Executive Director Anthony White.
If you just press the button on the microphone with the person, there we go.
All right. Y'all can hear me now? All right. So good morning. My name is Anthony White, Senior Executive Director of Auxiliary Services for Durham Public Schools. Today I would like to provide an update on several transportation initiatives, including our exploration of public transit partnerships, an update on our crossing guard program, and information about school zone speed and bus stop arm enforcement. So let's begin with our work around public transit. Okay. So as we explore the possibility of partnering with public transit, our primary goal is to identify ways to improve access to transportation, reduce barriers for students, and ultimately increase on-time arrival rates. When considering a pilot, our focus has been on secondary students who are most likely candidates to utilize public transportation independently. As we evaluated potential schools, we considered two key factors. First, whether there's public transit stop located immediately adjacent to the school's campus. While several of our secondary schools have bus routes nearby, not all of our stops are conveniently located for students. Second, we looked at school start times and dismissal times. Our middle schools begin at 8:30 a.m. and dismiss at 3:15 p.m., while our high schools begin at 9:15 and dismiss at 4 p.m. Any potential partnership would need to align with those with those schedules to be successful. This slide highlights the schools that meet our initial criteria for consideration. We review each of this secondary school's campus, evaluated its proximity to existing public transit stops. While some schools have transit service in the surrounding area, these schools have stops located close enough to the campus that make them practical candidates for a pilot program. As we think about where a public transit pilot would have the greatest impact, it's important that we look at our transportation performance data. This chart was presented to the Board of Education in, I believe, April of this year when we gave our presentation about express stops, but I thought it'd be important to share this information again. This chart shows our on-time arrival rates from April 7th through April 10th, with schools grouped into 3 tiers. So tier 1 represents elementary schools, tier 2 represents middle schools and Durham School of the Arts, tier 3 represents our high schools. Our district goal is 90% of students arrive on time. As you can see, our elementary students are consistently meeting that goal, while our middle and especially our high schools present opportunities for improvement. One point that I would like to emphasize is how we define on time. These percentages are based on students arriving 10 minutes before the first bell, not at the exact start of school. As a former principal, I believe that the buffer is important because it gives students enough time to get to class, settle in, and be ready to learn when instruction begins. If we've measured arrival at the actual start time, these percentages would be much higher. But this metric gives us a more meaningful picture of operational performance. Taking that information into account, these are the schools we identified as potential pilot sites. We have Northern High School, Riverside High School, Hillside High School, and Durham School of Technology, and of course they share the same campus. Southern School of Energy and Sustainability, and also City of Medicine Academy. If we were to prioritize one location, Northern High School would likely be our first recommendation. Its location in Durham, combined with the conversations we've had with school leadership about transportation challenges, makes it a strong candidate for us. There are other schools are also viable options, but before launching any pilot, before launching any pilot, we would want to work closely with Go Durham to ensure that the bus routes and schedules align with the school's instructional day. All right. Next, I'm going to provide an update on our crossing guard program. So this slide identifies each school currently served by crossing guards. As you notice, the majority of these schools are elementary schools. Several years ago, the implementation of family responsibility zones increased the need for crossing guards at many of our elementary schools. Some schools require multiple crossing guards because they have more than one high traffic crossing location. Before discussing some specific updates, I would like to thank our partners at the Durham Police Department and everyone involved in coordinating this program. Their assistance with training, staffing, daily operations has been invaluable for us and our students here in Durham County. Over the last year, we've continued evaluating each crossing guard location to ensure that we are using our resources where they have greatest impact. For example, Hope Valley Elementary remains a high priority because of the traffic volume and roadway conditions at University Drive and Chapel Hill Road, at Dixon Road. The combination of higher vehicle speeds, limited visibility in certain areas, and significant pedestrian traffic makes this an important location to continue supporting. At C.C. Spalding and Sandy Ridge, we reduced crossing guard coverage after reviewing utilization and we've been finding that there's been consistently low usage for our crossing guards at those locations. Weiss Smith Elementary was also reduced from 2 crossing guards to 1 based on the utilization while still maintaining appropriate student safety. Murray Massenburg, which began receiving crossing guard support in January, serves an area with substantial pedestrian activity and continues to show a clear need. And for Lakewood Elementary, we're continuing to work with our contracted partner, which is All City Management, to ensure that coverage is in place for the upcoming year. One of our biggest takeaways from the past year has been that utilizing a contracted service model has proven to be the most efficient and sustainable approach. Managing the recruitment, hiring, training, scheduling, substitute coverage, and day-to-day supervision internally requires a significant staff and time allotment. Our partnership with All City Management has allowed us to provide more consistent coverage while reducing the administrative burden. As we continue evaluating the program, we will use the utilization data and safety considerations to ensure that crossing guard resources are deployed where they can have the greatest impact on student safety. As we consider expanding the crossing guard program, it's important to understand that there are a number of factors that determine where crossing guards are most needed. We maintain a priority ranking for each school using a scoring system that considers several safety-related measures rather than just relying on one single factor. We evaluate each location using a comprehensive set of criteria, and some of the key considerations include the posted speed limit, existing traffic controls such as stoplights or crosswalk signals, the number of lanes that the students would need to navigate across, and whether the location falls in the high injury traffic network outlined by the county, and also the distance between the school and the nearest crossing point. While every school values additional safety measures, our responsibility is to prioritize the locations where the need is greatest, and where the crossing guards will have the greatest impact on student safety. The data-driven approach helps us to make informed decisions while ensuring that we're using our resources effectively as possible. And the final topic that I would like to discuss today is our work around school zone speed enforcement and school bus stop arm enforcement. Last July, in North Carolina, legislation authorized the use of electric speed enforcement systems in school zones. Additional legislation also allows for automated enforcement when motorists illegally pass a stopped school bus. And so here's how the process works. So a driver is speeding in the school zone or illegally passes a stopped school bus. A camera system captures the violation. The system records the vehicle speed, photographs the vehicle, and captures the license plate information. Each potential violation is carefully reviewed by the vendor, then validated by our local law enforcement before a citation is issued. This review process helps to ensure that only legitimate violations result in enforcement. Once the violation is confirmed, a civil citation is mailed to the registered owner of the vehicle. If someone else is driving the vehicle, there's a process for identifying the appropriate driver. It's also important to note that these are civil citations and not criminal violations, so no driver's license points are assessed. The goal is not to punish drivers unnecessarily. It is to encourage safer driving behaviors around our students. At the end of the day, this initiative is about one thing, which is student safety. Whether students are walking, riding a bicycle, or getting off a school bus, we want them to be able to do so in the safest environment possible. As a former and sometimes present school bus driver, and yes, I still drive the bus sometimes, I personally witnessed motorists illegally passing stopped school buses, and it's one of the most dangerous situations that a bus driver can face, because you never know when a child may step into the roadway, and you never know what the driver is thinking. So it's important that we are evaluating different tools to make sure that our students are safe. Over the last few months, we've been focused on learning from districts that have already implemented these programs, and we've met with several vendors to better understand the available technology and the implementation process. This summer, we also attended a transportation conference in Asheville, where we had an opportunity to speak with neighboring school districts here in North Carolina, and also from across the country who have launched similar initiatives. And those conversations have given us some great insight into best practices, implementation strategies, and lessons learned. As we move forward, we will continue evaluating those experiences to determine the best approach that meets the needs of Durham Public Schools and Durham County. So the next few slides, I have if I can get to it, like a timeline. And I'll just say before I get started, this is a lofty timeline, but I think it's important to have a starting point, understand that it will probably need some adjustment, but we have flexibility, but wanted to have a starting point. One of the first steps to be working with our city county partners. So each municipality will need to adopt the appropriate ordinance before the program can move forward. So together we need to establish operational framework for the program that includes like what constitutes a speeding violation for a school zone. For example, is it 5 miles, 10 miles an hour over, 15 miles an hour over? Like what triggers a citation? As well as we have to define the review and validation process with our law enforcement partners. We've already begun laying the groundwork and meeting with several vendors and evaluating different implementation models. And we've examined everything from camera infrastructure, installation requirements, and data accessibility and system functionality. Another area where we've placed a very significant emphasis is on privacy. Throughout our conversations with each vendor, we've asked detailed questions about how information is collected, how it's stored, how it's protected, and access. And privacy is our priority in Durham Public Schools, and it will remain a key consideration throughout this process. And as we move into the fall, our goal is to continue collaborating with our city, county, and law enforcement partners to establish procedures and determine how the program will operate locally. From there, we would identify the initial implementation sites and select a vendor. Oh, is that? Okay. One consistent piece of advice that we've received from districts across the country is to start small and implement the program well before expanding it. Taking that approach allows us to evaluate effectiveness, make adjustments, and ensure that we're implementing the program in an equitable and thoughtful manner. A critical component of this work would be community education. Before any citations are issued, we want our community to understand why this program is being implemented, how it works. The outreach would include social media, local media, direct communication with families and community members. And during that initial implementation period, I believe it's the first 30 or 60 days, rather than just receiving the citations, drivers would receive warning tickets just to let them know that the program is here and to be mindful of the violations that may be occurring. This educational phase gives us an opportunity to raise awareness and encourage behavior that changes before the actual enforcement begins. So ultimately, this is about improving safety for our students by reducing speed in school zones and discouraging motorists from illegally passing stop school buses. We're creating safer environments for our students who walk, bike, or rely on school transportation each day. And an additional benefit of this legislation is that any revenue generated from these civil citations remain with the local school district. That provides Durham Public Schools an opportunity to reinvest those funds into student safety initiatives. And as we move forward, we can explore how those resources may help strengthen and sustain the programs such as our Crossing Guard program and other safety efforts across the district. Our focus will continue to be implementing this program thoughtfully, collaboratively, and in a way that best serves the students and the community. All right, that concludes my presentation, and thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or further discuss any of these initiatives. Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Britton?
Thank you, Vice Chair Alam. Thank you, Mr. White, for your very excellent presentation. I really think this is timely that we're discussing this because on last Friday we had the Great Durham Attendance Summit talking about chronic absenteeism in Durham Public Schools and trying to make sure that our kids go to school. So I'm really glad that we are thinking of solutions of how we can get our kids to school. I had a couple of questions. I had a comment first because something was brought up to me while I was there on last Friday about the city has a Uber service or something like that where micromobility, and the question was asked of me, and I said I would have to check with my colleagues on the city council about how far out that goes, particularly with regards to unincorporated areas of the county, because we have kids who live in those areas and trying to get to school. So I just wanted to put that out there. The questions I have is around, how are we doing with our bus driver retention? Is the base pay, has it gone up? And I know they get the monthly stipend. So is retention and recruitment, is it going well? Are there still challenges in those areas? And then the other question is, do we know how many DPS students from the previous school year or previous school years utilize Go Durham to get to school? And if we don't, do we know how we can get that information? So thank you so much.
I'm going to start with the second question first. So we don't have a metric to track how many of our students are utilizing Go Durham. That's something that I'd be happy to work with our team and our county partners to see if there's a way for us to track that information. I know many of and again, as a former principal at Brogdon Middle School, I would see my students getting on and off the bus daily. And that was amid the bus crisis that we had 2 years ago, which we're going to leave in our past But I know that our students do rely on that transportation, and I know some schools rely on it a little bit more than some others, just geographically speaking, and culturally. Some of our students just they feel a lot more comfortable on utilizing that. But we can try to track that data and work with our county partners to kind of figure out what that is. As far as our bus drivers, I would say that we are in a good place. I'm gonna knock on all the wood I have up here, but we are in a good place with our bus drivers. We're not in the same place that we were 2 to 3 years ago. As far as recruitment and retention, we have placed a significant amount of energy in that. Even utilized some strategies from the school, gave a working condition survey to all of our bus drivers to try to figure out what we can do from a transportation leadership perspective to keep them here with us, because we do really value our bus drivers. As far as the recruitment, we have some new individuals who are helping us with recruitment and retention, and they've been doing a phenomenal job. And we have several bus drivers in the pipeline. I think we're in a good spot to begin this school year, and then we will be able to really bolster our workforce in the coming months after school starts. So, and the way that bus driver recruitment works is you have to continue recruiting. It's not a time where you stop. So just knowing that we have that kind of energy and spirit on our team, where we are consistently trying to recruit. And again, the biggest recruitment is retention as well. So making sure that we have an increased focus on that this year. But I do feel like we're in a great place.
Thank you for that. And what's the base pay for a school bus driver starting this school year, 26-27?
There we go. Mr. Teeter, he said 2022. I will also say that all of our bus drivers do receive a local $200, we call it supplement per month, and our safety assistants receive a $100 supplement per month on top of their hourly salary, which we're very happy that we'll be able to provide that for our drivers. Also, our drivers receive a $150 perfect attendance bonus per month if they are present each day.
That's good to know, and I'm glad that we as county commissioners were able to help with that. So I know we got more work to do, but we are just going to continue working towards it, right? So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I first want to say welcome. I'm sorry I was late, but welcome to all of our new school board members. Great to have you here. And I know this topic came out of, I think, one of our previous joint meetings, so it's great to hear the follow-up. I just wanted to understand, in general, is there some kind of a group that's working together right now between our city and county transportation folks? Maybe you said this in the beginning, but so you have like a working group that's...
Yes.
Okay, Sean and Ellen.
Are here in the audience.
Yeah.
We have a team specifically with Durham Public Schools Transportation, and there's been a lot of collaboration with the city and county partners, and it's been great. We've been able to collaborate and really learn from each other throughout this process and working together.
Okay. So each of the areas that you focused on are really important. I do have questions related to each of them. Related to the idea of, I'm trying to understand, is the goal of a pilot with the using city buses, is that to improve the timeliness of kids getting to school? What is, because obviously the high school is the one that needs the most improvement. What is the goal of that pilot? Or is it to free up bus drivers? I think originally it was like we were dealing with the crisis of the bus drivers and not having enough bus drivers. So what is the focus or the goal of that pilot?
The number one goal is to make sure our students get to school on time.
Okay, so whatever means, whatever method works the best. And could you talk a little bit more about, like, what would that look like? For instance, a pilot at Northern. What does that actually look like?
Yes, ma'am. So it would look like working with Go Durham, looking at the stops, the time of the stops, and like where the bus is going, and making sure that the time where the bus is able to stop, and the bus stop at Northern is right across Roxborough Road. If we want to make sure that it comes at a point where it is synchronous with our bail schedule, not necessarily 100% synchronous, but we wanted to work a little bit before, a little bit after, just to make sure that we're able to get kids to school on time. And if they happen to be late, they're not that late. And that will work in partnership with our standard bus, school bus service that we have. Again, just allowing some different options, because sometimes, we have children who miss the bus sometimes. And so what's my next option to get to school? So again, just trying to remove barriers. We start talking about attendance and making sure we're getting our kids to school. What are some of the ways that we can eliminate barriers to make sure our students are in classes and learning?
I think that sounds great. And if we can do that and then figure out a way to measure, how many kids are actually taking the city bus, and then if the attendance improves, and the timeliness, that would be great. So I hope we can move forward with that. Related to the crossing guards, I'm on BPAC, so this has come up a lot. BPAC has especially been interested in the school walk zones and making sure kids can get to school safely, and especially they've done a lot of work around Hope Valley. Just to clarify, is the walk zone policy still in place for Durham Public Schools?
Yes.
Okay. So to me, that makes this like really important because if we're expecting families and kids to walk to school, then we need to make sure they are going to be safe. God forbid something happens. That would be horrific.
We'd like to clarify, we call it family responsibility zone. So not
okay, family responsibility zone. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So I know you highlighted certain schools where it wasn't really being utilized, but other schools where it really is, and there needs to actually be more, like at Hope Valley was one. What are the solutions for that? Because you mentioned that it would be great if the city could help pay for the crossing guards. Like, what is it going to really cost to have the number of crossing guards that we really need, and what are the possibilities for that?
So you start talking some keywords. You said possibilities. That means that when I hear that, I want to start dreaming big, right? So that means that all of our schools will have a crossing guard, and working with our partners here with the city, we have part of the work has been working through all city management, which has been a phenomenal partner for us. They handle the hiring, recruitment, the day-to-day operations, and things of that nature. Also, partners with Durham Police Department. They've been phenomenal working with us, and also staffing as well. What it would look like, again, I don't have the exact cost per crossing guard, exactly what it costs to fund a crossing guard for each location. I can definitely get that information. But big thinking, and in the perfect world, we would have every school would have at least one crossing guard, regardless of its utilization or not, because we never know when a family will choose to use walking as a viable option to get to school. So whenever they make that choice, we want them to be safe with that. The work that we've been doing is, I know I had a slide earlier that kind of talks about all these different criteria. We have a running spreadsheet. Every school is ranked, and we kind of look at our priorities, and that's how we've been able to kind of place crossing guards. That's why Hope Valley, and again, I'm very familiar with Hope Valley, it rises to the top. And we want to make sure that we are prioritizing our resources in places where it will be utilized more. But
it would also be great to get a follow-up on that, on like what are the
cost for it.
What are the, well, obviously there has to be a prioritization, but just understanding like what are we looking at big picture, because it can impact city funding, it could impact county funding. And I know you mentioned, it sounds like Lakewood is the most time sensitive. You said the funding runs out August 24th, I think. So, but yeah, I think it's important that we all work together on solutions for this and to stay on top of this issue. And then lastly, related to the school zone enforcement, wondering what, policies around the cameras, who has access to that information, because we know what's happening right now with, related to immigration. And I mean, just today I heard on the morning news that the Trump administration is revoking visas for people who have things like traffic tickets. So we have to be very, very careful related to that information. I'm all for us enforcing this, and also the schools getting money, having like an enterprise fund that you can then put back into school safety. That would be awesome. But I think we need to raise the issue around the cameras and the information.
Yes, as I stated earlier, the privacy of this is going to be key, because if we are able to move forward with this, our community has to know that riding past a school is not something that's going to put them in danger. I don't want our families to be scared of schools and school zones as we try to move through this. So again, one of the big concerns that I bring up and things I want the companies to talk about is privacy. How are you protecting the data? Who has access to it? By and large, the companies that we spoke to, and again, they're not just 3 companies who do this work. There are multiple. But as we've been going through this process, the overwhelming sentiment has been that the company has the access to the data. And like one company, for example, they talked about how the level of security in their cloud, it's like government level security in order to get to it. The only other people to have access to it are our law enforcement partners. Again, as we continue this work, if we continue to move forward with this and we have a partner, I would want to have a very, very clear statement for us, our community, everybody in Durham about what privacy looks like, and make sure that we are not discouraging people from driving near our schools, because they're safe places for our children, our families, and we don't want them to shy away from that.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
We have a line of folks, but just before, I just want to jump in, just to ask clarifying, because this was something that came up when we were discussing agenda prep also around the safety and security around cameras. Can we just get clarification, if you can share those privacy security policies that whatever company you guys move forward with, sharing that with the city and county as well, and for them to define, when they say law enforcement agencies, which law enforcement agencies that data is going to be shared with.
Yes, ma'am. From our feedback from our conversation, and I really appreciate your insight. We've gone back and we are asking for some very specific verbiage and some very specific information, and before we're able to move forward, that information will be provided, specifically around what are your stances on privacy, who has access to the data, which law enforcement partners, and when I speak of law enforcement partners, in this sense, we were talking about either Durham County Sheriff's Department or Durham Police Department, but I will make sure that is out in writing for our community as we move forward in this process.
Thank you.
Just do want to also state that we currently do have cameras on our buses now. These cameras that Mr. White is speaking of will only be operational once that stop arm goes out. So the current cameras on our bus now records footage for in the front of the bus and in the sides of the bus, and those are always on at this point. So just wanted to clarify that.
Well, thank you. Okay, and the stack I have is Chair Joy, then Mayor Pro Tem Caballero, Councilmember Carl, and then Mr. Tab, school board member. Oh, and Gabby. And I'll have to slip out in about 5 minutes to catch a flight, and I'll be passing it on to Chair Harrell.
Thank you. Many of the questions, thank you so much, Commissioner Jacobs, and people who have spoken have already been addressed. But I had one point of clarification around the conversations that you're having about the aligning Go Durham with the Bell schedule. Does this also, I'm just wanting to know if you're talking about the frequency of how often the buses, does that not just the beginning and the end of school, but like how the classes are in case, because even if the children are late or something does come up, they can be able to make more of the classes than just, being there at the beginning or the end of school.
Yes, ma'am. The frequency and the times are definitely a part of the conversations and would be part of our discussions moving forward if we're able to move forward with this initiative.
All right, thank you. That was my only point of clarification. Next.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good to see our school board friends. A couple of questions. So, first of all, the driver around, especially high school students taking Go Durham isn't just about safety and getting to class on time. It's about increasing ridership for Go Durham. Long term, we want as many Durham residents to use our transit system, and the easiest way for folks to do that is to grow up riding the bus. You go to any major city, and that's what happens. People use transit, they're used to it, they're not 35 and afraid because they've always been in a car. So that's also a huge, at least from the city's perspective, a huge motivator. The county and the city spend a lot of money to build out and run a world-class free or fare-free bus system, and we want to keep doing that, and we want our young people to utilize that service that they also pay for. Award-winning, right? Award-winning, literally. Best large transit system in the state of North Carolina. And then secondly, I know that when we, as a city council with Axon just a few months ago, we had an additional addendum, and so I actually asked DPS folks to talk to city attorney's office. There was very strong language around privacy, and there are certain things that, regardless of the contract threshold, so even if it's under the manager's contract threshold, for it to get turned on, for tech to be used, it actually has to come to council. And there actually has to be a vote, even though administratively maybe that wouldn't have had to happen. And we did that in order to ensure that whoever our police chief is, whoever our city manager is, and whoever's sitting in city council, like that is an open and transparent conversation. We felt very confident in our chief and very confident in our city manager currently, but personnel changes and different electeds come in, and so you want to create a culture and a system and processes that it doesn't matter who's in the seat, they're going to have that conversation publicly. So that's a suggestion I encourage DPS to do around the tech parts of it. Who holds it? There are companies that you own the data, they don't own the data. That's something that we just did as well. And so again, I encourage DPS to talk to our city staff around the tech that we just put in, like 3 months ago? Yeah. And then with the timeline and things, I think I probably need to see the slides again, but I just want to, and Commissioner Jacobs, the city is paying for crossing guards in our current budget, so we extended that program for this fiscal year. I think the hope would be that that fund potentially funds, like that's how you pay for the crossing guards. You collect the fees and then you pay for them. That would be the hope. So I just, whatever you need to hear from us around whatever approvals or whatnot, just let us know. I am very, very interested in, again, ensuring that people can take, and I want to commend city transportation staff. Riverside and Northern used to be on the same bus route. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, they were on the same bus route. We've increased frequency every 15 minutes. We've separated the bus routes so that they're not on the same bus, which was a very long route, and folks really weren't utilizing it. And then finally, county and city is really going to need to talk about infrastructure. Riverside still doesn't have a good sidewalk in front of it. We want students and staff potentially, right, to take city buses. We need to make sure the infrastructure in front of those buildings is safe. I know Northern is well suited for that pilot, so I'm excited about that. I know Hillside also has really good infrastructure in front of it, and so does Jordan, but not all of our comprehensive high schools and not all of our schools do, and so that's a conversation that we're going to have with city and county partners around how do we think about that and how do we prioritize the infrastructure in front of our school buildings. Those are all my comments. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Council.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you so much. Great to see everyone this morning. Again, sorry I was late as well. So good to see everybody, especially our new colleagues on the school board. It's great to have you here. Thank you, Mr. White, for the presentation. This is really important stuff. And I think I'm glad that we flagged this, I think, at an earlier conversation. This is something we need to talk about among the three boards. So it's really an important conversation. I guess I'm still unclear because this is a key objective for our city. I think we all agree on that. We want kids to get safely to school. We want to use these resources efficiently. What's not clear to me is what is the ask here? So certainly the questions that Commissioner Jacob asked about, what is the cost? So we get this. This is really important. But I think what's lacking here is okay, what does the school board, what does the county need from the city? What do we require of you all? So I'd love to have this conversation, but we've got to be a little clearer. We have these meetings once every quarter. This is valuable time, so we need to use this efficiently. So I need to know what's the ask. I get the timeline and all that. So that's my big question there, because I think we have extended our budget this year to extend the crossings on Hope Valley, but to strengthen that, to expand this to other schools, what is the cost? What are we asking? So that's one question. I also would urge, and I think Councilmember Jacobs also mentioned this, if we're going to do pilots, then let's gather data, right? So let's find out how many kids are riding these buses to school. Let's find out if there's not utilization in certain schools, why are families not walking to school that we've got crossing guards there? So let's be smart about that. So those are two things I would ask. The other thing I want to say is I do see two red flags here. So we did have a conversation recently about Axon. We've got tons of emails recently about flock cameras. Are they allowed in Durham? The state authorized those. I think that was part of your slide there. The state authorized that, I think this last session, right? Allowed this on state roads, right? Across the state. So we've gotten emails about, are there flock cameras in Durham? And what we tell folks is yes, there are flock cameras on private property. There are flock cameras on state roads. They're allowed on state roads now. But if we're now saying I don't know if this flock is a vendor or who the vendor is, but these automated license plate readers are a thing for our residents in Durham. And so I can see if we say, yeah, now we have flock cameras in all school zones, people are going to freak out about that. So we got to be clear if we're going to do this. I get that it's a tool to control speed, but we got to be clear if we're doing that, what the implications are for our residents. So I want us to think about that. The other thing I want to think about, because we've seen this conversation over and over, is you mentioned a contractor to manage the crossing guards, right? So again, we can't require contractors to pay a living wage in this state. And we've had this conversation over and over. We hire contractors, what wage are they paying, and then we get sort of sideways with our residents. So if we're going to use a contractor, let's be clear what that means in terms of wages and benefits for those workers, and whether it's not better for us, if we need that support, to have that in-house and to pay for that. So those are the questions I have. I think this is really important, but I think we need to think through a lot of these big issues. So thank you.
Board Member Rivera.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for welcoming us in the space. Thank you, Mr. White, for your presentation. I had a couple questions, and I'm so glad I kind of went in this line because some of my questions got answered by other members, so thank you for asking the ones that you did. Specifically, so I'm going to just start with my first one on the pilot schools conversation. You mentioned that the goal is to get kids on to school on time. That is the main goal of this whole thing. So I was wondering, do we have any data around the Go Durham bus routes and what their percentage is on getting to places on time as well, to ensure that we're not just causing another problem? My second question with that is, if we are going to replace for Northern High School and do this pilot, are the bus routes going to be somewhat similar to what they are right now, or are we asking students to go to further distances to get to the bus? And how do we ensure that our students are actually having access to the bus routes that we're now kind of shifting back to Durham? So that's my first question, if you want to start there.
Okay. So the first question is phenomenal. I would say that I do not have the access to Go Durham's arrival data. Me personally, I can track Durham Public Schools buses. I don't have the information as far as the on-time arrival rates of Go Durham. Okay, you want to come join me? Okay, all right.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sean Egan. I'm the City Transportation Director. Really glad to be here to talk about how we get children and families to and from schools safely. So I'll say that we've set a goal of at least 90% on-time performance for Go Durham. We are right now, we had our performance review yesterday. We are above that 90% threshold right now. We are, as Councilmember Riss said, the best urban transit system in North Carolina. So that's one of the criteria that we submitted when we were an applicant for that award. So in addition to the on-time performance is important, but frequency is really important as well. As Councilmember Caballero said, 2 years ago at this time, Riverside and Northern high schools were served one bus per hour. Southern High School was served by one bus per hour. So even if that bus is on time, if somebody gets there 3 minutes after that bus departs, they're waiting about an hour for the next bus, and that's going to be really disruptive to students and teachers and educators. So our focus has been on looking at, and we know that our best chance of providing really effective student transportation is with high school students. So we've looked at, there are 10 DPS high school sites. We traditionally have served them one bus per hour, but we have been on a campaign over the last 2 years. So 2 years ago, in 2024, we went from 60-minute service at Northern and Riverside High Schools to 30-minute service at both of those schools. In 2025, at Southern High School, we went from 60-minute frequency to 30-minute frequency. We also we added Jordan High School to our 15-minute service on the Route 5. And then on August 22nd, so later this month, 2 days before the first day of school, we will add more service on the Route 4. The majority of the Route 4 will become one of our frequent service routes. So Northern High School, which, like I said, 2 years ago was served by one bus per hour, will get a bus every 15 minutes. So the on-time performance, we're going to continue to focus on that, but the frequency is really critical to address those concerns about someone who's running a few minutes behind, who misses that departure. If there's another bus coming in 15 minutes, that student is going to get to school a little bit tardy, but is going to have the majority of that day of education available. So of the 10 sites, we have 15-minute service at 7 of the 10 DPS high school sites. We have 2 sites with 30-minute service, and then one of the sites, which is in Research Triangle Park, is served by the RTP Connect microtransit zone, which is operated by RTP Foundation and Go Triangle. So there's transit access at all 10 of those, and our focus is really on the frequency and building up. And these improvements that we've been making over the last 2 years are possible only because of the support of the Durham County Transit Plan. So all of these service increases that we've done that have doubled, quadrupled service at Northern High School, these investments are coming from that half-cent sales tax for transit that's collected across Durham County. Without the support of our Durham County Transit Plan partners, none of this would be possible. We'd likely still be at that 60-minute service at most of our schools. So we're going to continue to do that. We have some boarding data that we can collect and share in terms of what we're seeing at the stops closest to the schools. in terms of the how many boardings a day we're seeing there. We're seeing heavy activity at the high schools. We're also seeing significant activities at several of the middle schools. Brogdon Middle is a good example of that, where we're seeing really strong ridership. So we're happy to share that, and to the extent that infrastructure improvements are needed, say at Riverside High School, it would be great to have this enterprise fund with the revenues from the school bus and the speed camera citations to be able to pay for not only the crossing guards, but also infrastructure improvements that are needed at DPS sites to provide those safe access to transit services.
Thank you so much for giving that off the cusp quick presentation. So my follow-up question to that, and just for me to understand kind of what the goal is in the end. So is the goal to actually have no buses from Durham Public Schools going to Northern High School, and instead we're now solely relying on Go Durham as the transportation? No, that is not the goal. Okay, so what is the goal?
The goal is to allow students some optionality in how they get to school. Okay. We want to make sure that our yellow buses are getting there early and on time. And in the event that a student chooses to not get on the yellow bus, they can choose Go Durham. But we want to, again, break down barriers for students getting to school on time.
Thank you. That is very helpful. Okay, so then second question, I'm just going to kind of go through the rest of the questions I had because other people also are ready to jump in as well. So a second question, as we kind of keep going through, so after pilot schools, I noticed that you mentioned that some of the schools for the crossing guards, they weren't utilizing them, and thank you, Member Riss, for mentioning that we need to get some information on the why they're not utilizing them. But then a follow-up is, if we're noticing that maybe they're not utilizing a crossing guard, can we reinvest the money for a crossing guard into a speed bump, or can we reinvest that to other infrastructure needs to actually start addressing it if it's just that they're not using it? That was my second question.
That's a great question as well. I'm not sure who do you have. Okay.
So we evaluated more than 30 potential sites for crossing guard locations. There's merit and value in all of those sites. Right now, we're able to do a maximum of 19 sites. So we have 15 school crossing guard positions that are managed by the Durham Police Department, and then we have 4 sites that are provided through the contractor. So our focus really is on using the available funding to get as many of those 19 sites covered as possible, and then we have alternate sites. So we've done an analysis. We worked in partnership with DPS on that analysis, but I would say we have well over 20 sites that would benefit from crossing guards. The program is really, it's oversubscribed in terms of the need for that, and that's why the possibility of having the revenues from the school bus cameras and the speed zone cameras is really a great next step, because that would allow us to fully fund all of the best candidate sites for crossing guards, and then potentially make some additional investments once that's taken care of. But right now, we're not in a position where we're able to fund all of the good candidate sites for crossing guards.
Thank you for sharing that. And that makes sense and what you're saying. And so thank you as well for creating, the system and helping us even understand the need and providing the resources to fill this need. That kind of leads into my final question is in the security, what are we calling this? I just want to make sure I'm using the right words. In the security cameras that we're talking about, so I know we've been talking about making sure that we're keeping data secure. So I guess really my concern is there really a way to keep it secure? And at what point, with the current climate we have, and with a lot of this overreaching of if there's information out there, that there's policies that can be put in place that says, hey, anyone, as long as the information's out there, anyone can take that information. Is there really a way to protect it? Especially if we're using these in school zones. So that means across all of our Durham public schools, there's going to be almost a half a mile of information that we're just gathering. So is there, what policies, or is there anything that we already know for sure of it's going to be only on at these specific times during the day, and it will be off the remaining times of the day? Like, can we put measures in place to ensure that our communities are actually safe? Because when we keep talking about safety, and we're speaking safety of the kids, and that's great, that is the main goal, how do we not cause unintended harm to our communities in trying to keep one population safe as well? So that's my question.
So I think that's an excellent question. I think one is going to be in the education that we're able to give out to the community if we're able to move forward with this. I'm going to address the first thing that you spoke of with the privacy. Again, I just wanted to reiterate, definitely high on our priority list. Number one, safety, privacy, and they go hand in hand. We don't want people to feel scared just to drive through. We've been doing a lot of information gathering about when the stop arms are active, like when the cameras are active. Again, that final decision will have to be made in collaboration with like law enforcement and just everyone, like everybody that's at the table. It's not something that would be set by Durham Public Schools. So again, that's going to be a collaborative conversation, and we will all have to be on the same page about what this looks like, and that will have to be established first before we can get out there and campaign to say, hey, this is here. And I personally, I feel like before we even get to that place, there needs to be a lot of information about why we're doing it, like how this works, what would be shared, what's not shared, who has access to information. The information that I've received in talking to different vendors and talking to different contractors over the course of the last 2 months is that the company that captures the picture or the video, they are the initial owner of the information. There are some companies that allow us in Durham Public Schools to access the information on a secure server. There are some that only allow the local police department to access the data on a secure server, and we don't have any. I would not have any access to look at anything. And again, there's no final decision about what we're going to use or which company, but I think those are the questions that I just want to let you know, those are the questions that we're asking, and this is the data that we're gathering in this process. So I just want to reassure you that it is at the forefront, and we will make sure that we keep that there as we move through this process.
Thank you for that, and thank you for even thinking about those questions. And also thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for speaking earlier that there is an option of us being the owners, and we would really love the information as well.
All right, Board Member Burr, did you have any questions or comments?
Good morning, everybody. I appreciate everyone's questions. I appreciate the presentations. Thank you so much for what you're doing. I do want to just double click on a few things folks said, which is around the parent responsibility zone, student responsibility zone. The issue is there aren't enough sidewalks, especially around Hope Valley. I've heard a lot about that. So y'all know better than me, but who pays for the sidewalks? Is there a schedule prioritizing for that? Because I think that's part of like the bigger picture that we're looking at needing more sidewalks so that folks can use the walk zones, the cross guards, things like that. I did have a question about the contractors risk. You brought that up. Do our entities have do we ask groups that we contract with, for example, the cross guards, is there like, we want people to get paid this level? Is there a different rate for contractors? I know employees all have a certain wage that they're all supposed to receive, but do we have an ask around who we contract with and what they're paying their workers, or are we just hands off with that? That's a question which you may or may not have the answer to. I also have more questions. I think all of our entities, our institutions, we're trying really hard to build trust with the community. And so I think we have to be really careful when we're thinking about finding people in our communities to at all, basically. And I know you're well aware of that because you brought it up, but just want to make sure, like, we need people to trust us. And so I wouldn't want to damage our relationships with our community members. Do we have information on how much the camera systems will cost? I feel like there wasn't a number on how much that costs there. Do we have a number on how much could potentially be made? Do we have a number on what is the current data of how people are speeding through these school zones? Is that a big problem to start with? Or are we just using this as a way to make money to pay for cross guards? I don't know like where the problem starts and ends and what the solution is without some of that information. And then do we have, I love the idea of like warning people ahead of time with getting, but do we have a process for community engagement on this idea? Councilwoman Javiera brought this up, or maybe Ritz brought this up, that people are not going to be happy with this idea. So where are we engaging community? Because maybe community is actually like, hey, we're tired of people speeding around the schools. We want a solution. I mean, that could be something that folks want, but where are we engaging community on this idea? Another question is when, where, how does a vote happen on any of this? Has there already been a vote and that this is a process that's moving forward? Do all three of our groups have to have a vote? I know I heard the word ordinance, but what's the before that part? Yeah, how will success be measured is my other question. Will it be kids attending school on time? Will it be having money to pay for crossing guards? Will it be less speeding? I just could see a rubric with like, here's all the stuff we want out of this and here's all the stuff that happened. But I'm not sure exactly what all that is. And then the last thing I wanted to say is I love the city bus. I didn't have a car for years, not by choice. So I would ride the city bus. And I had a youth group, and I would teach students how to ride the city bus so that they could have some ownership and agency over their own lives. But you have to kind of teach people how to use the bus. And do we have an education component to teach young people how to use the bus? Maybe there's partnerships that we could work on. Definitely an education campaign. And the city bus has been awesome for years also, because I was riding it back in the day, and it's been great. So I'm super excited about making it more accessible to young people. So thank you so much.
All right. You gave those questions really, really fast. Is there one that you would like for them to follow up on?
I was writing as fast as I don't.
I guess just the sum up is sidewalks. What's the process? Mm-hmm. Contractors. Is there a guaranteed pay for contractors? Another process for community feedback. Will students be educated on how to ride the buses? Just because it's there doesn't mean people know how to do it. how will success be measured is another question. Yeah, the actual cost of the cameras. What is the data currently on people speeding around schools? Like, is that the problem we're actually trying to address?
Okay.
And then when, how, and where is the vote for any of our organizations? And is this a proposal, or are the wheels already in motion? And all of that's asked very humbly, because I just really want to know, and I appreciate all of your work.
All right. So out of those questions, I have a couple of them that are mine. So he has a few, and then maybe some of them are going to be answered at the table here. So as far as the cost of the cameras, there is no upfront cost to us for the camera systems. It would be provided free of cost from the company, and a part of that agreement is that there would be a revenue split, and each company has their own metric and different ways to go into it. So, for example, we can say, all right, company X will receive 50% of all revenue generated from any tickets, and Durham Public Schools will receive the other 50%. There may be another company that says, hey, just pay us a subscription fee per month based on the number of cameras you have, and then any revenue that you keep is what you keep. But each way you go about it has pros and cons, and again, that's what we are kind of really digging into, because we don't want to put ourselves in a negative situation. The question about the crossing guards and how much they're being paid, I did not have that data, but I will find that data out, and I'll be happy to get that to you. And I apologize for that. The current data about speeding data, current data around speeding in school zones, I don't have that, but I will give you this quick anecdote. There was one morning, I remember this morning very vividly. I was standing out at the street helping with carpool with Officer Coghill. Shout out to Officer Coghill, who always helped us out at Brogdon. And we were standing there, and he was talking to me about the cars that's coming past. And he said, I want you to look at this car that's coming towards us right now. The car was going, he said, from my training, and he's a retired officer who's doing off duty. He said, my training, that car is going about 55 miles an hour down the speed zone on Leon Street. And he said, I can't get out and stop it right now because I'm not going to be able to catch it, but I'm going to try to do he said, I'm going to try to do what I can to try to slow it down. So as he saw the car and he did something that he's way braver than me, he kind of stepped into the street a little bit to try to get the driver's attention. And then he had to move out of the way quickly because the driver wasn't paying him any attention. And just think, if they would do that with a law enforcement officer in a uniform standing on the street, imagine what kind of feeling that would evoke for some of our children. And that's something that I witnessed firsthand. So again, around the data of how frequently it happens, I don't have that, but I know that it does happen very frequently here in Durham. The process for community engagement, any vendor that we elect to move forward with, they have a community engagement plan and team that work with us on getting that out. So that's not something that we have to manufacture or produce ourselves. These companies have been working with different cities, states, and so they have a playbook on community engagement that we would partner in and disseminating that information. And the educational component to riding the bus, we do have someone on Durham Public School staff who specializes in safe routes to school. That is something that we do. I know that there's also information with Go Durham about riding the bus, and we actually give some of that information out to our families. And lastly, success being measured, safety for our students, getting the kids to school on time is not so much about the profit. Profit is great, but at the cost of, I mean, student safety is number one. Getting our kids to school on time so they can learn is 1B. So those are our priorities, and that's how we would measure success.
I do have some data nationally. According to the National Association of State Directors in Pupil Transportation, it's estimated that there were about 45 million stop arm violations in 1 year. Had about 130,000 bus drivers that participated in a survey, and that equated to about 95,000 stop arm violations in 1 day. At the state level, it's about 3,000 per day. And so you put kids attached to those numbers, one kid attached to those numbers, but we know there are multiple kids that get off stops. It's definitely, and I would imagine that our bus drivers probably would estimate around maybe 90 to 100 per day here. So it's definitely an area that we just can't continue to watch the numbers on this one.
So following up on the incidence of speeding, so we don't have data collected here in Durham for our school zones, but we are participating in a peer exchange. And so we recently got a presentation from the city of San Francisco. The city identified about 30 locations for speed safety cameras. What they found was that they had multiple corridors where 25% or more of drivers were going 10 miles over the limit. So that's 1 in 4 vehicles going 10 miles over the limit. And they introduced the cameras at those locations, and across the board they were able to cut that number to 2%. So and everything we hear from our residents, our community, is that speeding is an issue across Durham. And excessive speeding is an issue across Durham, and these locations where children are coming to and from school, and we have the school zones with the flashers active around the bell times, but there are students and families and staff going to and from schools throughout the day. And so making those places safe throughout the day is a critical goal that I think we share with our partners at DPS. And then with respect to sidewalks, the city and county recently completed our 2026 update to the bike and walk plan. We identified 25 locations for new sidewalk, 25 locations for sidewalk gaps in the network, and then 25 locations where there are intersections in need of safety improvements. So that prioritization process has now been completed through that plan, and that's been shared with the BPAC and other bodies.
And Director Regan, we're also with the bond funds, there's still more sidewalks we're actually building right now, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we're moving forward on sidewalk improvements. Just in downtown, if you go up to Corporation and Mangum, you'll see out on Holloway Street, as you're approaching Miami, you'll see sidewalk that's going in now, and those projects were made possible because of the Connect Durham 2024 bond that got 75% approval from voters.
All right. I have Board Member Kataif and then Mayor Williams, Mr. Tab, and Caballero. Okay. Hi. Mr. Casey. All right. So, yes, I got you on there. All right. So I'm just giving a few more. Okay.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, commissioners and council members and everyone from DPS for being here today. My questions, you kind of just hinted at one of them. I was wondering if we have any analysis between the efficacy of the camera monitoring versus other traffic slowing measures like built environment, speed bumps, signage, things like that, in terms of how much of a difference it makes when we're kind of analyzing, like, is the security risk to our population worth the payoff of the increased safety? And then as far as, this is for if we do enter into these surveillance camera contracts, is there possibility of ensuring contractually the safety of the data if the company is purchased, changes ownership? We're seeing a lot of private equity buying up things. Just that's always at the top of my mind, making sure that, like we talked about before, other law enforcement organizations outside of Durham Police Department are not able to access any of that data. And then my last question is just that are Go Durham bus drivers prepared and trained to potentially handle large populations of children getting on their buses? Dealing with kids and high school students are still kids is a different population than adults, and Durham Public Schools bus drivers are trained in that area. So just want to make sure that everyone in the community is ready for that, for liability on all sides. Thank you.
We stand side by side. I think some of it was kind of both of us.
So I'll start with effectiveness. So we implement traffic calming infrastructure improvements, and we see significant reductions in average speeds. We'll see 1, 2, 3 miles per hour reductions in average speeds from our infrastructure improvements, and those reductions are significant, and they're adding value. What we saw from the Pier Exchange in San Francisco was an 80% reduction in gross excessive speeding. So from the time that they launched it, within a year, the number of citations in the same locations was down 80%. We do not have built environment interventions, countermeasures that provide that kind of reduction in that gross excessive speeding by drivers. So that was for speeds 10 miles per hour or higher above the speed limit in those areas. So in terms of effectiveness and tools in the toolbox, this is an incredibly effective tool. And then with respect to transporting teenagers on our Go Durham buses, we do it every day. I hear about it from our other customers who are going to work and bothered by rambunctious teenagers on their buses. I think the best thing that we can do to address that is to address the crowding issues that we're having on our buses. The more crowded that bus is, the more risk there is of kind of disruptive behavior. And so what we're doing with the Northern High School service, where we're going from that 30 minutes to 15 minutes later this month, is we're spreading those out. We're also starting some of the trips on the southbound just about at Northern High School. And so we're hopeful that those trips will pick up a lot of the students and then reduce some of that crowding and disruption that's experienced by our other passengers. And I'll say, with respect to training, we do train. We're carrying thousands of DPS students every day. So we're training our bus operators on how to manage, how to de-escalate, reduce incidents. Some are better than others. Some of our veteran bus operators would probably have employs the same strategies that are employed on your yellow school buses. They're very effective. Some of our newer operators, we're always hiring. If you know anybody, Go Durham is hiring. We have very generous wages and benefits, so spread the word.
I have to take this microphone. Durham Public Schools is hiring for bus drivers as well. So we continue to work on that training, making sure that we're setting a tone of respectful behavior on the buses, and that we maintain that respectful behavior. But it is a challenge, and it certainly is something we hear about from folks who are going to school, going to work, but we think it's providing a really valuable service to the Durham community, transporting those students. So we're going to continue to manage that and train our folks to maintain that respectful environment. And I believe the one question that I could respond to is about the privacy if the company decides to sell. That is a great point, and I appreciate you lifting that up. And it's something that we will, I have down to make sure that is added to any kind of questioning or any kind of privacy questionings or information that we receive moving forward. Thank you for that.
I'll just add to that. We certainly want to be partners in this, and so if there's ever an opportunity where there's a Jordan, Riverside, Southern city bus where your drivers are experiencing a significant amount of challenges, please let us know. We work with those schools' principals to just have some conversations with those students. And I will also say, based on some national data, although we have not piloted the school bus cameras, stop arm cameras here, there was a pilot done in Pennsylvania where they looked at the annual data for the entire school year over close to 31,000 school buses, and they had about 667 citations. The pilot they did over 47 days with just 2 buses yielded 205 violations. So those were traditional enforcement measures, cops, signs, speed bumps, versus the 2-day pilot for these cameras. And I will also say, based on some of this data, 90% of those individuals that violated the stop arm didn't repeat that violation. So there is some success in terms of, when you know better, you do better. When you get caught, because again, people are rushing in the mornings. And I would just hate for something to happen to any one of our scholars.
Mayor Williams.
Good morning, everyone. Just quick question. Well, one, I want to manage expectations. When I ride the bus, especially out to South Point, I don't think there's any managing behavior of those kids. Just not going to happen. I've witnessed it myself several times, and one of them said, "Hey, ain't you the mayor?" And they all started apologizing for cursing. It's just not going to happen. But, I also is a reflection of just people. And so I think we have a real opportunity here. And I appreciate all of the questions. This is one thing I love about new elected officials, because you go back and ask the foundational questions that some of us become after you've been in office, and will happen to you as well. You're going to have so much information in your head that you're not going to think about those foundational questions, and you're just going to continue to build on the policy, and eventually you may leave people and they're not understanding why you're making certain decisions. There are going to be people that say, I don't want cameras involved at all. There are going to be people that says, please put cameras out there. I always say remove the labels and remove the bias and think about what the end goal is. What are we trying to do? Keep kids safe, make the environment safe, and get them to school on time. And also maybe alleviate some of the struggles that we have with driver shortage. We're sharing the burden now. My question is there an opportunity, and you don't have to answer this yet or now, considering the federal administration is special, are there opportunities for us to resource stack between FFA, FT, the Federal Transportation Administration, and the Department of Education?
So I'll say one of the things that hasn't come up yet, but I think is important for us to clarify, is that there are federal regulations that prohibit bus systems that take federal funds from being used for school transportation. So to the extent that we plan a service that is specifically designed to replace a yellow school bus, that is a violation of federal regulations.
Right, and I don't want to cut off, but I'm not saying we are becoming the school bus providers or the school providers for buses. More so resource stacking around educational institutions or LEAs becoming safer. There's a safety component, ridership increase in those settings. Are there any types of resource stacking where there's some creativity without having to designate the purpose of a city bus with federal resources to become the school bus or student transportation provider?
So the best example is the partnership that we have around Safe Routes to Schools. So Safe Routes to Schools is a federally funded program. It used to be administered by the city, but we found it challenging because a lot of it was getting integrated into the curriculum, getting into schools, into students. And so we reached out to DPS several years ago and suggested that we would sponsor basically those federal funds that come from the federal government to go to DPS, and then they would build their own staff. So they have multiple staff now at DPS who are providing information about pedestrian safety, about bicycle riding, about how to ride a transit bus, and we've had a really strong partnership. We continue to work closely with the Safe Routes to Schools team, and it's been a great example of how we can work together, leverage that federal funding, but make sure that we're getting good information and providing that travel training to students. And the DPS folks on that team have been excellent for us to work with.
Thank you.
Mr. Tabb.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Mayor Williams hit on something that I was going to mention, and that is we're going to have people who are going to be for and against, and some of them will come out strong about these cameras, and so we just have to be prepared for for that. I do want to raise this notion about when you're using cameras, we have to also be concerned about the data of what areas people are going to say that we're utilizing more officers in this particular area, and that it's unfair. Because, we just have to be aware of those kinds of things. And I do want to offer: do we have areas where we're utilizing the radar speed signs more, that with the LED lighting that tells you what your speed is? I know a lot of areas use that in lieu of writing a lot of tickets. So, but I'm wondering, in Durham, do we actually utilize letting us know this is your speed, and is it effective, or do we have any data on that?
So whenever we put up those radar, those your speed signs, they collect the speed of every single vehicle, and we capture that data, and then we can do analysis on that data. What we find with our analysis is that when a lot of them you'll see are kind of on a trailer, they're designed to be mobile. When they're first deployed, we see reductions. And then after a few weeks, sometimes a few months, the behavior essentially, because there's no consequence to it, to the excessive speeding, the behavior that basically returns, and we go back to the baseline. So some of them are fixed, like on Gregson Street, for example. There's a location that's been fixed. We have not seen that to be effective in reducing speeds. There's that initial response where people are thinking about it, and then once they get used to it and they know that there's no consequence associated with that excessive speeding, the speeds return to baseline.
Well, I tell you, it works for me. So I don't know about anybody else, but I don't need any more tickets, so it works for me.
Are you done? Okay, Mr. Kaysen.
Good morning, everyone. This conversation really touched on two things that I really love: collective impact and community education. Thank you for the presentation and the great discussion. I do want to just reflect the fact that when we have these public meetings and these great Q&A sessions, that's community education as well. This discussion is also informing the community about what we're thinking about these things. My one question is this. One thing that the community may not be aware of because they're not deeply into the details like many of us are here, are we talking about two sets of cameras, a stop-arm camera as well as cameras that are placed in neighborhoods around school zones? That's not really clear in what we've heard so far.
Thank you for that question. So we are talking about two different sets of cameras. One set being sets of cameras that are affixed to our yellow school buses that will be monitoring for drivers who are violating the stop arm, meaning that once the stop arm is out, the stop sign is out, and they pass that school bus. That is one camera system. The second, which many of these companies, they do both things. So we would want to partner with one company that could do both things. The second one is the school zone cameras, where there would be a camera at either end of the school zone that would capture that information as well. So thank you for bringing that up for clarification.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. And then with the second kind of camera, that's just basically a motion thing. Like, it's just going to capture you if you're going faster. It's not just constantly recording.
So the information that we've gathered so far is that it can be set for different times. It could be set for, just throwing this out there for an example, 30 minutes prior to the start of the school day and 30 minutes after. So it will have like a run time, like at the middle school, it'll run from, 8 to 9 during prime time, and then again at dismissal. It can have that kind of functionality. I think that, well, of course, we wouldn't be able to turn the cameras off. So if you drive through there at 12 o'clock, I think that the cameras probably would be able to still capture you, but I'm not sure exactly what that would look like as far as enforcement is concerned. But again, these are all the small details that we work out with the company, and make sure that one is collective amongst everyone here, and make sure that our community knows what the specifics are surrounding that.
Yeah, I think it's one thing to have timed thing versus constantly recording. So yes. I think that being vendors who can meet that need or have that ability to turn things off, I think is critical. I just want to remind folks, it doesn't really matter. Like, we know that the different law, regardless of quote who has access to data, if there's an appropriate warrant, appropriate process, they can, and that's current now, right? Like, that doesn't change. So I do want to remind folks that, like, we think we have all these safety things already, and we don't. And so that doesn't mean you can't put as many guardrails as possible on a thing. But I want to remind that. And I think when we talk about the community engagement, I really hope that DPS staff talk to city staff. We have an entire engagement department. The city does an incredible job. We run participatory budgeting. We run budget workshops every fall. We do community engagement very, very well. And so I hope you lean on us. We've done many rounds around tech at this point in the city of Durham. I think we've done at least 4 around this issue. So we're veteran with this question. And so again, talking to our our city attorney's office, really structuring what kind of contract do you want with the vendor? Who does what? You do have choices. Even if they say you don't have choices, you do actually have choices, because if they want the money, they're going to do the thing, right? And so I just want to really lean in on that, to please look to others for that expertise. And then I think the question on sidewalks that actually didn't get answered. The city funds sidewalks in city limits. Not all school sites are in city limits. We do not pay for infrastructure that is outside of city limits, and there is a lot of complicated factors of even, okay, we're going to build a sidewalk out in the county. You'd think it'd be straightforward. It's not. So I just want to flag that, because it's been like every 2 years, every 3 years, this comes up. I will say that almost every single rezoning that comes to the city of Durham, and has for years, has voluntary proffers from our development community. That just goes to DPS. Like, you could earmark that. It just goes into your general fund, as far as I'm concerned. You could earmark that for infrastructure around schools. Like, y'all have choices there. I don't know but once there's a certificate of occupancy, that money just goes to DPS. And so that's a question. And I'm just going to put the county on the spot here. They're not going to like it. The transit fund can also fund infrastructure outside for certain things. It is not what it is used for currently, but there's no reason not to, right? So I'm just offering these things as all kinds of ways that infrastructure can get built around our school buildings. I will say that it is a priority of ours. I will say that the bond in 2024 was a huge success, and it was also run on an even year, which was a first for a municipal infrastructure bond. Sidewalks and street improvements for the city are consistently ranked as one of the highest priority of city residents in our surveys. So running another additional to our CIP, thinking about another bond, identifying those things, that's another tool that is asking residents to increase their own taxes, but at least it's asking them versus just us doing it to them. That's all. Thank you.
And just one part on that. We have enough city-owned streets, sorry, Chair, city-owned streets to stretch from Durham, North Carolina to Dallas, Texas. And if we were to put sidewalks along every one of them, it would cost $119 billion. So we have a long way to go. We'll just make it a life priority.
All right, thank you, Councilman Barist.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Great conversation. And again, thanks, Mr. White, for your comments. I want to go back to your high-level goal, right? So the goal here, it's not about profit, right? It's about safety for kids and getting them on time. That's the key thing, right? So I just want to say, this idea of having cameras, they collect fees for a private entity and also pay for school guards. I just got a lot of heartburn about that. It feels ultimately feels like a predatory thing. We're collecting fees to pay for a program. I want to go back to Member Ben Katave's comment about, are we thinking about all the options? Because one thing we haven't talked about, and I appreciate, Sean, all the stuff you mentioned about sort of speed bumps and all that kind of stuff, traffic calming, but one thing we haven't talked about are school streets or car-free school zones, right? That many communities on the country have. I know LA, New York, San Francisco have those where we close the streets in front of schools in the morning and the afternoon. Is that something we've considered? Where are we on that? Because I know as a member of BPAC, I know we talk, and I've been to a ton of conferences, as Sean has as well, about bike and pedestrian stuff. Closing streets in front of schools would be a way to ensure for sure that there's not unsafe behavior, but also could address some of this kind of, the utilization of people not really using this crossing guards. If we close those streets in front of schools, we can ensure safety. And again, that's a Vision Zero thing, right? We got to design safer environments for kids, right? So they're not in conflict with cars. So where are we on conversations about actually closing streets in front of schools? And I know not every school could do that where they are, but a lot of streets in neighborhoods, or a lot of schools in neighborhoods could do that. So is that not an option?
Well, thank you for your comments.
Yeah.
I have not engaged in any conversations around closing off the streets in front of schools. My initial, I think that's definitely an interesting and innovative way to kind of look at the problem solving. And if there are conversations around that, I would love to be at the table and being able to kind of help work through that. As far as the Stop Arm program being the sole funder for the crossing guards, I would like to say I was very, I use the word supplement because I don't believe that, again, we don't, the goal is not to go for profit. And so I'm not saying, just remove all funding for crossing guards and Durham Public Schools is going to be responsible. Because a lot of the data that we've seen is that initially the violations are up, but the goal is to reduce violations and reduce the instances of people violating the laws. And if you look at it that way, as the violations go down, there lies the revenue as well. So that would go down. So again, as we are moving to this model, I think we also want to be very cautious about where we are before we say, hey, we're just going to take on, Durham Public Schools is going to take on everything before we know kind of where we are. That's why I was very careful about using the word supplement versus we would take it on initially, because it's not 100% for profit. Yes, there are dollars attached to it, but if our goal is safety and making sure our students are safe when they're traveling to and from school, we can't solely look at the dollar amount. The dollar amount is extra. It's icing on the cake, I would say, in comparison to the first goal of the initiative. If that makes sense.
Appreciate that. And I wonder, Director Egan, if you might comment on the car-free school zones. I know there's competing priorities. There's safety. There's folks want to get to wherever. So I'd love your thoughts on that.
So right now we have established 55 school zone locations across Durham. Many of them are not right in front of the school, but they're along a road that's used to access the school. So, and we're seeing, significant speeding issues. We hear about it from the crossing guards, the amount of speeding that is going on on roadways that are around the corner from a school. So a lot of our school zone locations are not just the stretch, the frontage where the school building is, but it's on those key points of access. Those key points of access are also major arterial connectors across our community that are used by tens of thousands of vehicles every day. So I think there may be a few cases where that could be something right in front of a school location, but between the number of those locations that are on state roadways, which would be very challenging to close, and then the number that are on arterials that are carrying 10,000 or more vehicles a day, the disruption. We already have a very constrained roadway network in Durham. We have a lot of dead-end streets that don't connect to each other, and so the idea that we would close off some key connectors that are used by tens of thousands of people every day, and then I think the other piece of it is, I don't know what the stats are, but there's a very large share of families that drive their kids to school. They drop them off in a car. So how do you manage that if you've closed the street in front of the school? How do you manage pick up and drop off? I don't know what the share of families is, but it's, as a DPS parent, I can tell you that the car lines are very long at pick up and drop off every day. I get to see them from a bike, so I get to skip them, but they're long every day. And so managing that pick up and drop off, I think, would be another really critical issue for making sure that kids can get safely to and from school.
Appreciate that. And that raises a larger philosophical question, right? So we create incentives for car drivers all the time. So when do we create incentives not to be in a car? But that's probably a larger conversation.
Commissioner Jacobs, and then Board Member Katave.
Oh, no, I'm good.
You're good? All right. Commissioner Jacobs.
Well, this has been a great conversation this morning and really important. I just want to follow up on a few things. One is for the school board, I love the idea of pilots. Pilots, it gives you the opportunity to try things out without a huge commitment. So even, just thinking about that with how you approach, moving forward. I also appreciate all the conversation about making data-driven decisions, but at the end of the day, it will, we're all going to manage, as different people have said, different issues. But we know that the safety of our students is number one. I did want to also give the perspective that, because I've been involved in just regional transportation for a while, is that, speeding is a national issue. Since the pandemic, we have seen the change in behavior of drivers in this country, and it's a problem, and it's really it's a big issue, and it does come down to behavior, and it is a national crisis that we're seeing and here in Durham and in North Carolina. I love the comments about how do we help educate bus riders, and I think that is really key. I was at a transit conference in Portland. They actually had youth ambassadors who were helping actually older adults to get used to riding the bus. So we can think of some great ways. Bike Durham is an awesome nonprofit partner now that the Safe Routes to Schools program is in the schools, but I think that also could be a way to help manage behavior also. So I think that sounds really exciting. I do want to mention, I know the Durham County Transit Plan was mentioned, just want for education of everyone, we have a finite half-cent sales tax for transit. We have an adopted 20-year plan, is that right, Ellen? We already have a plan that's projected 20 years out of how that money is projected to be spent. 75% of that goes for bus service. and that is already spoken for 20 years out, and also to only 25% is for regional transit, and that means things like implementing bus rapid transit, which we know is expensive, but really key for Durham and for creating regional connections. So, if you want to take money out of that for sidewalks, then it's going to take away from other things that are already actually allocated in the plan. So I just wanted to give that perspective. Also, microtransit. This is Commissioner Burton brought this up. I wonder if Ellen or Sean could talk about the microtransit program. It's a pilot that the city and the county are doing together, where we found that the majority of people using it are kids going to school. And I think I would like us to learn more about that, because there's also the question of, is it cheaper, more cost effective to expand our microtransit program rather than to put another bus on the road? The cost of the bus, the cost of the driver. So I think when we're talking about data, we need to look at that and think about that. And I wonder, so two things, if you could tell us more about the data from that program, who it's serving, who's using it, the costs, what are the ideas about that moving forward. And the second is related to the sidewalk. This is the first time the city and the county have done a county-wide, I think, plan, city and county together. Actually, we haven't heard the results of that yet. But also, one of the issues being addressed is, as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, we have a problem with sidewalks in the county that was flagged as something that we need to work on. I don't know if you all are prepared, Ellen and Sean, to talk about the recommendations on that. But anyway, those are the two things I just wanted to flag for follow-up.
We have what we call the Go Durham Connect microtransit program. So we've established two zones, one in East Durham, one in North Durham. The North Durham one goes all the way up to the Trayburn Research Park. So we have been doing a lot of work to get the word out about the program. The idea is that we have what we call a first mile, last mile problem in transit, where people who live more than a mile away from a bus stop can't get to the system in an efficient way. And so the idea of the microtransit is that you can call and a vehicle that looks like an Uber or a Lyft will come and pick you up, and then it'll take you to a bus stop, and then you can hop on that next bus and be on your way. And you can also travel point to point within the zone. So families in North Durham, for example, because of this, can travel to the Museum of Life and Science, which is part of the North Zone. So that's been a key partnership. Actually, if you go to the Museum of Life and Science, one of the first things that you see when you walk up to the front door is a sign promoting the Go Durham Connect program. So we've seen continued growth in the utilization of that. I can follow up with specific numbers. It's funded at about $700,000 a year. To put that in context, that's about what it costs to run a bus for a year, one single bus. So we're providing really critical connectivity to places that are hard to reach, like the Wheels Fun Park, for example, is not close to a bus stop, but we know that a lot of residents and families want to get to Wheels and some other of our DPR facilities, for example. So this is a way for transit to be used to make those first mile, last mile connections, and it has been very cost effective in terms of providing really broad access to areas that are difficult to serve with a 40-foot bus. And so for the cost of running a 40-foot bus for a year, we're able to provide coverage across North Durham and East Durham. And then, Ellen, do you want to speak about the bike walk update?
Good morning. I'm Ellen Beckman, Durham County Transportation Director. Before I talk about the bike walk plan, just to add on to the microtransit pilot, we did get some statistics back in April that we presented to the Board of Commissioners that there were about 8,000 trips and about 700 of those were to DPS locations. So I know it's serving some of those areas that are hard to reach, as Sean mentioned, schools like the School for Creative Studies, Neal Middle School, Oak Grove, some of those schools that are kind of out there on the periphery. And so for the bike walk plan, yes, we have been working with the city over the past couple of years on the development of that bike walk plan. It is in its final stages. There are some issues, though, that we need to work through before we can bring it forward. And one of those is the responsibility for maintaining sidewalks in the county. We've kind of run into some legal issues about that, so we're trying to work through that. I think Sean gave a good overview of it, of how it identified, 25 locations, and corridors and intersections. I know that several of the locations that you guys have mentioned this morning were recommendations. So like Riverside High School, I know that's one of the prioritized corridors. And Hope Valley, I think the Chapel Hill Road was one of those prioritized corridors. For the county projects in that plan, the vast majority of sidewalk needs are in the city. Certainly want to recognize that. It is not going to be possible to build sidewalk throughout like rural Durham County. So for the county, we're mostly looking at those areas that are right on the edge. And all four of the county projects that we prioritized were near schools. So places like Oak Grove Elementary, Lions Farm, Neal, Southern High School, and Forest View Elementary School. So think of those areas. And in each of those locations, we looked at the network and looked at what gaps were there and made some recommendations. I think all of those recommendations included networks that span city and county. Like you can't really build an effective sidewalk network in those areas without going between city, county, because as the individual parcels are annexed, and those don't always correspond to a corridor. So I do think this is an issue that Durham County does hope to work through with the city to identify how we can address areas like that on the edge. So it is not ready to be brought forward for adoption yet, but this is one of those topics that we need to iron out before it can be brought forward.
Thank you.
All right, colleagues, are there any other questions or comments before we go? Okay, Ms. Rivero.
Thank you. I just had one final comment. I know I just want to be very clear. I know we've been talking a lot about attendance and security cameras on buses, etc. And it just seems as though we're all kind of feeling a little hesitant in some ways. I know myself I am, on just what that looks like, who has access, how to keep people safe. So I would just lean on the side of caution of finding other solutions first before we go to the big one of like the cameras that many of us are feeling really unsure about. So I'm so glad that Member Jacobs was even mentioning like what are the other options, as well as Councilmember Riss, what are the other options, and just keeping that as the forefront of keep trying to think about what can we pilot at the schools, maybe this year, maybe next year, that we can get some more data around what are the other options before we go to this one that we already know is going to be controversial. We already know there's a lot of overreach that's happening. So I just want to say that. And then the last thing I want to say, and I would be remiss if I didn't say it, is just the bike bus. I know we keep talking a lot about what what can we do? And the bike bus is something that some schools are piloting and trying, where kids get to school not on not on buses, but on bikes, and they go in big masses of 50 plus kids getting to school. So just thinking through, like, how do we utilize the resources we currently have so that we don't get ourselves into this sticky situation where we're feeling a little bit uneasy of how can we actually protect our families, how do we actually protect our students, while also really wanting safety for our students. So I just want to throw that out there and just kind of leave it at that. So thank you all. Thank you for your presentations. Thank you for everyone that's been spoken so far.
Thank you, Ms. Rivero. My only other final comment, very short, is just what I'm thinking about as we've had this robust conversation is just around our community engagement and our community guardrails around their safety. And so I'm hearing administration, like, 'cause this is ultimately coming back to the school board around these conversations that are going on with the contractors and what they're going to be able to offer. And part of that discussion is what their community engagement plans look like. And so I'm looking forward to understanding more as we get more information about these different contractors and they're exploring the cameras, what that community engagement process will look like, and how we'll be able to understand what the guardrails for the community are around their safety, what their temperament is, you know, for these kinds of surveillances and things like this, and how that can also inform decisions we make around, you know, transportation and our safety in general. So curious to see how that comes forward. So very interested in that. If there are any other comments or questions, or if not, Dr. Lewis?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate the fact that cameras on buses are not new. We have, I think everyone understands, we have cameras that are always recording on our buses. These cameras would go out, as I mentioned, when the stop sign goes out. And I think it also allows an opportunity to take the bias out of some traffic violations. You know, police officers keep what they call stop data, and it's just generally the make and model of the car. But there are other descriptors of cars that they don't keep data on that bias tends to play in. For example, if you see a lowrider truck riding down the street, you probably know, you can probably make some assumptions of who may be riding in that car, or some cars on rims, right? So I think it allows to take the bias out of it. And also, when you think about just our current ridership for our city transit, is around 1% of our students that participate in the Safe Routes to School survey that they administer every March and November. It's about 1% with, I think, Northern and Hillside taking advantage of bus stops. And so also wanted to remind these boards and our public is that we have a tremendous amount of resources on our website under transportation services, the Safe Routes to Schools. We have the micro transit guides on there as well that tells families that every 30 minutes this bus stops at this school, or every 15 minutes for Jordan and Hillside, every 15 minutes the bus stops there. So there is some data that we can continue to leverage. And one of the open-ended questions that we're asking that survey is, what are some of the barriers that you feel in terms of getting to school, and reckless driving and construction and traffic was one of those. And so the more that we can provide safe opportunities for our scholars to get to school and on time, you saw those high school numbers. A biggest implication of that is our high schools are making programmatic and shifts in their systems within their schools, i.e. not putting their core curriculum classes at the first period because the buses can't get to school, and that should not be. You know, our jobs is to make sure we're getting the kids to school on time, and high schools should structure their day based on best practices. And so excited about the continued conversation as we work to keep our students and community safe and get our students to school on time.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. All right. And
I'm sorry. I feel like I need to say this because I'm just traumatized. When it comes to the big bag surveillance conversation, I feel like I'm not in my own interest, but I do feel like I need to say this for the folks that constantly do reach out and say, where they request these types of resources. it is a part of our reality now that there are cameras around us, including these devices that are filled with AI, and yet, there's a big public debate about anti-AI. So I just want to be able to function in reality on it. And I also want to highlight my appreciation for the cautionary approach that we're having around this table, because it's easy to be reckless and just say, yeah, go with it. So I appreciate that, but I also want to be very clear. We can ask as many questions as we want. At the end of the day, we're going to have a purpose to fulfill, and that's going to be policy. And there are folks that are asking every day that right now, why don't you all put more cameras out here? And they do not look like the folks that come to our meetings and say, we don't want surveillance in Durham. So I just want to put that reality out there, and that's what we're going to have to struggle with when we have these meetings, and who comes to talk to us, and also listen to who don't come talk to us. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments. And
mine's just a logistical. We had talked through the meeting schedule. I just don't want to adjourn us before, and I'm not seeing invitations on calendar, because we had the leadership team meeting in July we had moved some of the meetings around because technically we wouldn't meet with DPS and again, all three boards until February, and there was a decision made to do all three boards, and I just don't remember the date on that. And so I'm looking for staff, because since everyone's here, I want to flag it, and I want to flag what the agenda items are, because that already got decided. That's what I thought, but I'm not seeing. I just want to go. I think it's helpful to go ahead and state when the next meeting is and at what time and where it's going to be, because then it's been stated first, and what the agenda is. And I thought that there was staff that took that information down at that leadership team meeting in July. Oh, thank you. Good morning.
Hi, Monica Wallace, clerk for Durham County. So I was just speaking with the clerks and the admin for DPS and for the city, and we just wanted to make sure we had it on our end as well because of some of the changes. So I'm showing here our next combined meeting. It was actually scheduled as a city-county meeting, but we are adding DPS. That meeting is scheduled for October the 13th at 9:30 a.m. It will be hosted by the city. And the agenda topics for that meeting that are listed is Durham minimum livable wage. You're requesting a presentation from Sally Hodges, Copel, NC Budget and Tax Center, as well as a 2027 Joint City-County Committee meeting calendar. So I guess we'll be approving the calendar for the next year.
Thank you. I love when we did good work at some point. That was my only, I just wanted to make sure that folks had that information. Thank you so much.
And I'm sorry, if I could also just add, you all have a City-County DPS leadership meeting on September the 1st at 3 p.m.
Okay, hold on.
But that leadership,
that's just leadership.
Yeah.
That's not including the full board.
So September 1st is, yeah.
Okay.
I have that one.
All right,
Thank
perfect.
you.
all right, at the beginning of the meeting, we didn't have quorum, so we didn't approve the minutes. So at this time, I can entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Thank you.
I'm sorry, we do not have a quorum for the city. For the county. Can we still do the vote? Because the minute meetings, one is for city county and one is for city and county and DPS.
Okay.
And we do not have a quorum for the county.
So we did, but now we don't. So
right. So I've already spoken with the clerk, so we'll just move all of the minutes over. Since all three groups will be here in October, we'll move them all over for a vote at the October meeting.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, well, I see Wendy Jacobs.
Just related to agenda items, one is it could just be in the form of maybe a written report, but just to keep following up on the transportation stuff that we discussed today, if we could just have some type of follow-up information or update would be great. And I did want to ask if we could briefly talk about one thing, which is whether we want to try to have a coordinated strategy between each elected body around the upcoming state referendum on property tax, limiting local government's property tax revenues. That affects each of our bodies. I was recently at our national Association of County Commissioners Mid-Sized County Caucus. There was robust conversation about this issue because this is a national issue that's happening all over the country. And one of the county commissioners emphasized that we have a responsibility, just like we do with bond referendums, we have a responsibility to educate the community about, number one, what is property tax? You know, how are we spending our dollars locally for property tax? You know, what is the role of property tax in our communities? And number two, what will actually be factual information about the impact of local governments not having adequate property tax revenue? And one commissioner literally said, we need to be putting it out there and explaining, if we don't have enough money, which program are you willing not to fund? And putting money to the program, and that is incumbent upon us as elected officials. And so I'm just wondering, can we start, in the past we've had blue ribbon committees to promote bonds. Do we have that? Do we get our PIOs together? But I just want to have a conversation with everyone about this, and it's time sensitive.
Hi, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Commissioner Jacobs, if you're comfortable, we have a leadership team meeting on September 1st, so we can at least take up the topic and figure out, you know, if chairs can have because historically what's happened is there's been folks identified from council or county commission to be the lead on a thing as an elected, and so we can have conversations there, saying, you know, who's going to talk to their board members to see who wants to lead a commission or whatnot. We could talk through, is there an opportunity to do a joint op-ed that we run all together? You know, I think that there's some opportunity. I don't at the late hour want to talk through that, but I do want to flag it for city and county and DPS staff, if we can just make sure we have that as an agenda item on September 1st. I'm seeing some head nods.
And also including in that a broader community-wide effort where we involve the business community, kind of like what we do with bonds.
Yeah,
not
we
just,
involve, agreed. So we can make sure to talk about that. And if that ends up being like something that staff says we really need the electeds to take the lead, I'm happy to make sure we talk through that carefully on September 1st.
All right.
I just want to be clear on the follow-up transportation items. I did hear Commissioner Jacobs mention a potential written report at the October 1. Is that something we also want to talk about at the September meeting?
Yes,
in terms of how we
because we'll have
follow
to
up on
think
that?
through agenda items carefully and how much time we want to allocate. This was great because we had only one big robust, but we have a few on the October 1, so we'll just have to think through the timing of that.
I think that's probably a lesson learned for future meetings. Maybe one topic is enough.
All right. Well, I'm going to slide on down here to public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? All right. Seeing no one, we are at adjournment. So at this time, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.